I found the paper years before my dad did. It was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of stationery people use when they want a letter to feel like a promise. I wrote Dad in careful black ink and handed it to my mother on her birthday. "Hide it," I told her. "Hide it somewhere he'll only find when he has to stop pretending." She pressed the envelope to her chest and nodded. She understood the word pretending the way only a wife does. I didn't leave because of one fight. That's the convenient story. The slammed door, the speech, the Honda Civic pointed west like a compass with a grudge. The truth is duller and sharper. My father loved on a scoreboard. Every test was extra credit, every hug a performance review, every "I'm proud of you" followed by a comma and a but. When you grow up graded, you learn to shrink to fit the rubric. In late summer 3 years ago, I packed the car, kissed my mother's hair, and told my father I'd call. He stood in the kitchen holding a Mercer Construction coffee mug like a prop that proved something. "You'll see," he said. "Out there isn't what you think." "I hope it isn't what you think," I said, and drove toward a skyline that didn't know my name. Seattle is wet even when it isn't raining. The air here carries water like a secret. I took a job at Northlight Housing, a nonprofit that builds apartments for families who run out of options before they run out of month. The pay was an insult to my Columbia degree and a miracle for my conscience. We measured progress in keys handed over, not profits booked. My father would have called it naive. He said that a lot when I was a kid, naive, like an infection you needed antibiotics for. I learned the city block by block, the way a nurse learns rooms on the night shift. The Ship Canal, the crows that sound like someone laughing in the wrong place. The way tenants light up when a lease says renewal instead of vacate. On my desk, I kept a photo of a 12-year-old named Mason holding up a key like a coin. He came to the office every day at 4:15 when it was loud enough to drown out the apartment above his. He did his homework under a flickering fluorescent and told me algebra was just a video game with fewer dragons. Sometimes I walked home past glossy windows that reflected a thinner, braver version of me. Sometimes I stopped at Sonny's Cafe for soup and the kind of pie that lets you forgive yourself for the day. Always, I checked my inbox. The letter I'd left behind started to feel like a bad joke. I'd asked my father for one sentence, "How are you, Em?" It was a child's request, really. The adult part of me thought he'd never send it. The daughter part hoped he would. Both parts learned patience the way you learn a language, slowly, with mistakes. My mother got sick. Ohio is 1,000 miles in flights and 1,000,000 in helplessness. I went home and held her hand and watched my father get loud instead of soft. He yelled at pill bottles for having names he couldn't pronounce. He yelled at the news for not fixing anything. He yelled at the microwave like it wasn't reheating grief fast enough. He wasn't cruel. He was terrified. Terrified men behave like they're auditioning for control. On the day we buried her, I stood between my father and my brother Tyler and understood that a family is a table with legs at different lengths. Tyler steadied us with jokes that were better than they had to be. My father steadied us with lists. I steadied myself with a plane ticket back to a life I could carry. And then one October afternoon, the email came. "How are you, Em?" 4 words, no comma and a but. No lecture wrestled inside a question. Just the sentence I'd asked for, sent from an address that had only ever delivered directions. I stared until the screen blurred. I made myself a cup of tea and forgot to drink it. I walked to the window and watched the rain move sideways. A part of me wanted to punish him for the years he didn't ask. Another part wanted to run to the airport like a kid late for summer. Instead, I wrote back. Thursday, 6 p.m., Sonny's, table by the window, no speeches. He arrived early. I could tell because he stood up too fast when I opened the door and smacked his knee on the table. He looked smaller and less armored, like retirement had sanded off corners he'd hidden behind. His hair had surrendered to gray. His eyes were my eyes, which felt unfair. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said. He didn't reach for me. I didn't make him. He asked the question again, out loud, right? "How are you, Em?" I answered like a person whose life is both fine and complicated. I told him about Northlight, about the building we were planning near the Ship Canal, about the neighbors who wanted a park more than they wanted people. I told him about Carla, who worked nights at a hospital and napped in her car to afford daycare, and about Mason, who was learning to solve equations and outgrow pity at the same time. My father listened. He has electrician hands, scarred and precise. They stayed still on the table. "How's Tyler?" I asked when I ran out of nouns. "Running the place," Dad said, meaning Mercer Construction. "Pretending to enjoy meetings that should be emails." We ordered the same soup without checking in with each other, a habit my mother used to call our twin trick. We didn't talk about the fight 3 years ago. We didn't dissect the way love gets misspelled as rules. We ate and let the quiet sit with us like an extra chair. Halfway through, he slid an envelope to the edge of the table, the one I'd left behind. He didn't push it across. He let me decide. I touched my name with my thumb and felt the way paper absorbs oil. "I wrote it on Mom's birthday," I said, 2 days before I left. "It found me when it should have," he said. His voice was rough with sleep he probably hadn't gotten since July. After dinner, I took him to the office. Northlight fits in 3 rooms and a hallway. A plant near the copier keeps choosing life by an inch. We have a bulletin board covered in photos of people with keys and shy smiles. The look of someone who wants to believe in a future but doesn't want to jinx it. Marcus, our program manager, walked by in a hoodie and greeted my father like he was a donor, a regulator, or a guy who knew how to fix a door closer. "She's a killer," Marcus said, meaning me, in a good way. "Don't encourage him," I said. "He thinks Excel is a love language." "Better than treating rent as a personality," he said back, and we kept moving. My father stood in front of the map with the push pins and understood, I think, that apartments are just walls until you put names inside them. On his way back to the hotel, he said he wouldn't ask about Thanksgiving. "There's a chair in March," he added, "or June, or a random Tuesday." There are sentences your heart recognizes even when your brain doubts them. That was one. He flew home. I returned to the daily work of convincing a city to make space for the people who keep it humming. The dishwashers, the CNAs, the daycare teachers with wrists that ache by noon. He started showing up in my inbox in small, human ways. Painting a room, dog on porch, might keep him. Tyler wearing a tie like it's trying to escape. He sent photos of paint chips with names like Quiet Harbor and Late Sky, as if the right color could repair a decade. I sent him instructions, long strokes, not back and forth. Don't overwork the corner. Open the window a crack and let it breathe. He asked about City Center, the downtown project Mercer Construction had chased for a year. They'd won the bid and then walked into a buzzsaw of politics. Council wanted affordable units. The neighborhood association wanted character, which my father used to translate as no one who can't afford my mortgage. Then something shifted. In a meeting I didn't attend, my father put a percentage on the table that would have given the old him hives. He told the councilwoman, "We don't want to build a building that makes us rich and you poor." When Tyler repeated that line over the phone, I had to sit down. It sounded like my dad, but it also didn't. "I didn't know he had that in him," Tyler admitted. "I did," I said, and didn't add eventually. It felt like insulting a sprout for not being a tree. In March, I flew home for a day that wasn't a holiday. We met at a Waffle House off the interstate, because waffles don't trigger anyone's expectations, and because my mother loved bad coffee and good hash browns. My father slid into the booth with a carefulness I recognized from job sites, men protecting their backs from old sins. He asked me how Seattle's rain felt. I told him it felt like a promise kept too long. He asked if I was dating. I said I didn't want a second job. He didn't push. On my way out, he asked if I wanted to see the house. "It's not a trap," he said quickly, mercifully. I nodded. We drove separately. At the door, I stood still and let the past catch up in manageable doses. The entryway hooks where backpacks had lived. The piano no one played, still dusted by the same sunlight my mother had called polite. The kitchen wall with our heights, mine in purple marker up to 11, then in black up to 16, then a gap where Columbia happened and adulthood grew in the dark. He led me to the spare room. He'd painted it a calm blue that felt like lake water at 5 a.m. when fishermen believe in luck. On the dresser, he'd laid the letter where he could see it, not where he could hide it. "It's quieter in here," I said. "Me too," he said, and I believed him. We sat on the back steps with his new dog asleep on his boot, Sunny, a name stolen from my cafe and pinned on a mutt who looked like optimism in a fur coat. The maple tree had put on muscle. The fence leaned a little, as if some truths were better when slanted. I handed him another letter, one I'd written on the plane and folded 4 times because old habits die a little dramatic. "Dad," I wrote, "maybe you kept score because no one kept score for you. That doesn't excuse the hurt. It explains the yardstick. I forgive you for measuring me like a room you needed to fit. I needed to overflow." He read it like a blueprint he finally wanted to follow. He didn't rush to apologize as if speed proved sincerity. He said thank you, and the air changed temperature by a degree. When City Center opened in June, he stood at the edge of the stage and let other people cut the ribbon. The councilwoman talked about partnerships. A tenant advocated for herself so well that I wanted to nominate her for office on the spot. Tyler looked relieved and exhausted, which is how leadership always looks in real life. I worked the Northlight table with a stack of pamphlets and a sore smile. My father found me after the speeches and said, simply, "You did a thing." "So did you," I said. We ate dinner with Tyler at Miller's, where the waitresses call you hun whether you're 80 or 8, and the lemon on the salad is always too much, which is how my mother taught us to use it. My father raised his glass, not for a speech but for the quiet kind of pause that says this matters but I won't make it perform. "To learning late," he said, "and to letters." I drove back to the airport at twilight. The hour, Ohio, looks like a painting you'd buy at a church raffle. I thought about the first letter and the second and the emails in between and how sentences can change the landscape if you let them. People ask me, sometimes, what I wanted from my father that I didn't get. The list is long and boring. More listening, fewer ultimatums, a little grace thrown in on days I tripped over my own life. But grief, my mother's absence like a soft chair I forget is empty, has a way of turning demands into requests and requests into invitations. What I wanted became simple. I wanted him to see me without fixing me. I wanted him to ask and stay for the answer. He does now, not perfectly. He still calls zoning sorcery and thinks kale is a prank. He still talks too loud around tax time, like receipts can hear fear. But he texts pictures of Sunny sleeping like a person and of Tyler at City Hall, pretending not to be proud. He sends me photos of paint drying and fence posts he replaced because it's cheaper than therapy. And he asks, over and over in a sentence that still feels like a warm room, "How are you, Em?" I answer honestly. Okay. Tired. Hopeful. Broke. Rich. I tell him about Mason's pre-algebra victory, about Carla's move-in day, about the neighbor who hates our shade trees because they shed, but loves our apartments because they don't. I tell him about a landlord who finally said yes because his daughter told him to, and about a council meeting that felt like a wrestling match, except someone brought cookies. When I'm home, I sit in the spare room and open the window a crack and let the June air move through. The letter lies on the dresser, soft at the fold from hands that finally learned how to hold. The house makes its noises, pipes remembering they are not rivers, wood remembering it was a tree. My father walks past the door and doesn't narrate. He's learning the discipline of not filling space just because it's there. I don't pretend we got a movie ending. There was no montage, no alchemy of forgiveness that erased history. There's just this, a man writing late and a daughter reading generously. A family table with legs planed and shimmed, steady enough for breakfast. Eggs, sometimes. Salad with too much lemon when we're feeling brave. The letter didn't fix us. It changed our posture. He stopped standing behind the scoreboard. I stopped standing behind my armor. We stand where we can see each other now. Most days, that's enough. When I left the first time, my father said, "You'll see, out there isn't what you think." He was right. Out there is harder and kinder and more ordinary than any speech. Out there is me explaining to a zoning board that density can be dignity, and then walking home in a drizzle that turns my hair to punctuation. Out there is a key in a 12-year-old's palm. Out there is my phone buzzing with a text that reads, "How are you, Em?" As if the world learned a new word. Some nights I cook ramen because nostalgia has better seasoning than I do. Some nights I go to Sunny's for pie and a seat by the window. And some nights I stay late at the office with Marcus, and a stack of leases while the plant near the copier decides, again, not to die. When the hallway is quiet and the push pins on the map glow like tiny city lights, I hold the newest set of keys and think about the hands they'll belong to. I think about my mother hiding a cream envelope in a place my father would stumble across when he needed it most. I think about regret as a road and not a wall. I slip my phone into my pocket, turn off the last lamp, and lock the door behind me. The rain has stopped. The sidewalk smells like forgiveness when it's clean. I walk home with my hood down, my hair taking in the air, and I tell myself the truest thing I know. We don't always get the fathers we want. If we're lucky and patient and honest for longer than is comfortable, we sometimes get the fathers we can learn with. Mine writes one sentence at a time. I answer one key at a time. We meet in the middle, where buildings are more than math and love is more than a ledger. And when the day's noise winds down and my phone lights up in the dark, his message is the same as ever, new every time. How are you, M?